Well, hi there. How are you today? What? Oh, well, we've got something quite interesting for you that will make your day so much better if you have a CP3 pump. If you don't, well, you just might enjoy it anyway. So stay tuned. Alrighty. So before we get started here, what's this all about? What are we doing? Sure, that's the question on everybody's mind. So what we're going to do, we're going to flow test. This is a stock LBZ LMM Duramax. Good stock pump. We're going to flow test it, and we're going to show you what it flows in stock form, and then we're going to take some of these modified parts, cascade valve, supply pump, improp. Duramax guy is going to call us fuel pressure regulator. Can't help it, you know. You guys call it a fuel pressure regulator, and I guess you could, but I think it's a dumb name. Bosch calls it a measuring unit, or a measuring proportionate. Cummins calls it a fuel control actuator, which is even dumber. So anyway, we're going to put all those modified parts on this pump one at a time, and may have a combination of up to 9 different ways, you know, using the same parts, one and then swap two for each of the 3 to make a combination of 9, and see what kind of a flow difference that makes. We'll have to get the machine warmed up. It's only at 26 degrees Celsius. So once we get it warmed up, we'll be back and we'll flow test this pump and see what it's putting out, and then we'll start our little deal here and just see what we get. Alright, so we're going to fire this thing up. We're just going to use the pump to heat the machine up. So you can see what it's flowing while it's testing. So we're going to come up to test number 1, and we'll turn our supply pumps on. And we're going to hit our start button. This is idle output, or engine starting, cranking output, 350 RPM. It's going to generate 60 MPa, 9,000 PSI. Typically enough to start the engine. We should probably see somewhere above 15 liters per hour output. That's doing pretty good there. Well, there's between 15 and 20. RPM stabilizing 17.8 or 17.2. It's going to move around a little bit because the RPM is not super steady on this cranking test. So we'll get us maybe the highest reading, and then we'll stop it. And we're going to come down to the next one. 750 RPM, 100 MPa. Now, we've got a, let me look and see. We've got just a stock Cummins fuel control actuator on here, improp. And we're going to also test it with, everybody say, oh, the LBZ fuel control actuator flows so much more. Or the LBZ fuel pressure regulator. From here on out, I'm calling it what Bosch calls it, an improp, okay? So, improp for the Duramax guys is a fuel control fuel pressure regulator. Okay, the improp for the Cummins guys is a fuel control actuator. But for everybody else that actually works on this stuff, it's improp. That's what we're going to call it. So we have a Cummins improp on here now, which everybody says, oh, well, that flows less than LBZ or LMM. Well, we're going to find out. So we're going to run our second test, 750 RPM, 100 MPa, 14,500 PSI. And here, start button. Also, our volumetric efficiency for the 350 RPM test was 78% roughly. we're up to about 90% on the 750 RPM test. Volumetric efficiency takes into consideration the displacement potential of the pump based on bore and stroke, how many pumping elements in the RPM. And the actual flow divided into that gives us the volumetric efficiency. It shows us how much capacity remains in the pump that we're just not getting in flow. So it's the percentage we're off is inefficiency. Okay, so we're getting 90%. All right, let's come up and we're going to do 1750 RPM, 160 MPa, 23,000 PSI roughly. Okay, we're going to start that one. Potential was 114 at 100%. We got 106 roughly at 92.5%. We're going to do 2700 RPM. This is about the top flow from the CP3 is about 2700 RPM. We get as close to 100% volumetric efficiency on a stock pump right there is what seems to be possible in any other RPM range. Once you start getting above that, they tend to start, you know, falling off a little bit. So then you've got, you know, like the guys that say they've got a high RPM CP3 that, you know, it doesn't, you know, the curve doesn't drop off after 2700. You know, it continues to maintain its volumetric efficiency through, you know, 3500 and on up. But they say that starts at 3000. What we've noticed is that it starts just above 2700. So here we go. We're going to run that 2700 RPM test. We got 97.5% volumetric efficiency there. All right, we're going to come down and run the 3500 RPM, 160 MPa test. Got about 92% volumetric efficiency. Okay, now we're just going to put the stock improp on here, LBZ LMM version. We're going to hit our E-stop. It's going to turn our pumps off so we don't make a mess. And let me get my ratchet. Now we're running this test. We don't have our improp connected. It's just running wide open, 100%. Get this other pump out of here. All right, let's close the doors and see if that made any difference at 3,500. Turn our pumps back on. So we got 210 and roughly 92%. Let's see what we get this time. I saw as much as 216 liters per hour. That's good for about 1% gain. Okay. So turn our pumps off again. Now we're going to swap another simple part. The cascade overfill valve. And for this Duramax pump, 19 millimeter, and it's just up on top of the pump housing in our test bench here. Real simple to get to. So it's got a brass washer beneath it, copper, whatever. Make sure that put it over on the new pump or the new cascade valve. And these need to be tightened about 30 foot-pounds. Which I'm not using a torque wrench, but I've done this 42,000 times. We'll get the old one out. Yep. So your question is, well, what's that part? What's it do? This is your internal pressure regulator. So when the supply fuel, let me open this up. Get this out of the way so we're not running into our window. So our supply comes into the CP3 pump here. This is our return and this is the high pressure out. So as the fuel from our supply pump, or you Duramax guys, unfortunately you don't have a lift pump in the tank unless you added some kind of aftermarket something or another. Let me grab a rag, hang on. So the fuel comes in, well, in here, and there's a passage through the body of the pump. The first place it goes is into your supply pump. Well, it comes out the other side before it gets to the fuel pressure improp. I just about messed up, didn't I? Before it gets to the improp and into your circuits, it's pressurized. The supply pump pressurizes it. So this cascade overfill valve, it's spring loaded. It's got a spring in it, and you can see that it doesn't take a whole lot to push these. So these are set to about, I think about 60, 65 psi, something like that. 60 to 65 psi, something like that. Seems like I messed up a word when I said that last sentence, so I repeated myself. But this pressure is required to open what's called a suction valve. It's really not a suction valve. It's actually a pressure valve located beneath these caps. And it takes a certain amount of pressure to overcome the spring pressure. It looks just like a miniature cylinder head. It's got a little valve with a valve spring and a retainer. Little bitty tiny thing. It takes a certain amount of pressure from the supply to overcome the spring tension holding the valve closed. So by upping the internal pressure of the pump, we can essentially like supercharge this fuel system and force more fuel in to be pressurized. And we're going to show you right now what difference that makes in real numbers. So we've got, turn our e-stop off, 213 is what we did last time, okay? So we've got changes we've made. We've got the Duramax improp on there, and we've got the high pressure modified cascade valve on there. So let's see what difference it makes. So we're at 213 and 92% efficiency. No point in checking it below the RPMs. After 2700 is when it starts falling off. So we saw the difference there. We went from, oh, what did we have to begin with? I should have wrote it down. You know better than I do. Was it like 204 or 205? And then we got up to, or was it 208? Well, it doesn't matter. You see where we're at now. Okay. We got up to 225.79, and that's 99.04% volumetric efficiency. We haven't even put a supply pump on it. So you're going to say, well, does the supply pump even help it? A little bit, maybe. The cascade valve will do more for one of these pumps than anything else. And that's still without having a really high flowing fuel control actuator on it. And we've got one of those we can put on it as well. So what we need to do is we need to look at the actual RPM. Our test RPM is 3,500, but our actual RPM when it computed this may be different. So let's look and see what that is. And we find that by browsing or by viewing. So we were actually 3,496 RPM during the test, and it should have been 227.97, and our output was 225.79. So we've done pretty good there. Okay, so full disclosure, the flow meter and the RPM do not update at the same rate. So the RPM could be higher at one point, and the flow could actually be a little bit more before it updates. Or it could be the other way around. The RPM could be a little higher and the flow hasn't updated yet. And so we've got numbers that, you know, sometimes are just a little off from each other. But that's the nature of the way that these systems work. So let's put, let's close this. And let's see if we can get right at 100% volumetric efficiency. So we're going to turn our supply pumps off, and we're going to put a more highly modified fuel control actuator on the pump and see what that affords us. And if we go higher, this is a brand new machine. We're still calibrating the flow meter on it. So I thought it'd be a good time to do this. So I get to see the difference for the calibration as well. So if we get this thing over 100% in volumetric efficiency, then obviously our flow meter calibration is off just a little bit. So we'll see where this puts us. And one of the biggest differences in a modified improp is not necessarily the overall flow. It kind of tricks the ECM into giving you additional flow with less throttle input. Overall flow is not really changed that drastically or dramatically. So let's see, let's turn our pumps back on. And we're at 225, 99.04%. So let's see what we get here. tiny bit, so you can see it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference in total output. Only thing we haven't done is put the supply pump on here yet. Let's go ahead and do that while we're here. Turn our pumps off. I'll have to get a tool for that. Alright, so get that out of the way. Alright, got 4 T30 torque screws back here. We'll lay us a rag down here. And it's stock. You see this one has been ported to match the passages in the body of the pump. And I believe it's 5mm. That's what we drill those to. Now, if you're going to be swapping those out, this is just a used one that's already been modified. If you're going to be swapping these out, if you've got rust buildup here or rust buildup on the back of the pump that you can actually feel with your fingernail, you can break this drive spline or this drive on the back of the CP3 pump. If there's rust there, it pushes against this case, and the gears that are in here is 2 gears metal to metal, 2 spur gears essentially, and just the rust itself, when you bolt this down, or even a grain of sand could push against this case, lock the gears up, and then boom, it just breaks the end of the shaft off of the pump. So you got to be real careful. Make sure it's clean. And you can just take a razor blade and scrape over it. You know, just hold the razor blade 90 degrees to the surface of the pump and the supply pump as well. And then when you do that, you just run it back and forth. Make sure you don't get it in any of your passages. Now, why are we not lining up here? There we go. Now, this may just put us right at 100%. These don't have to be super tight. You just don't want to fall off. Make sure. We'll turn our supply pump on. Make sure as we rotate it, after we've replaced it, that it seems to be free. Alright. Here we go. 98.25%. 226.94 was our flow numbers. So here we go again. Got them all on. Yep. Oh, and we're testing at 9 psi. It's probably going to drop when the pump kicks up to speed. These Duramax pumps, you don't need to run them near 10 psi. Between 7 and about 9 is about where you need to be. You start running the pressure up higher, you can't control the rail pressure. It just runs past the improp, so it cycles too much fuel past. This is just the inherent design of those pumps. So there we go. We're still not hot, you see, but we're maintaining about the same temperature, about 28 degrees for our calibration fluid throughout all this testing. Gave us 0.75%. Let's see where we are in actual RPM. This is one of those cases where the flow meter is a little ahead of the RPM, or the RPM is a little behind. You know, one or the other. So we view our results, 3504, and our spec at that speed is 228.49. It says we flowed 228.67. So this is essentially as high as you're going to get in your efficiency. And this is an impossibility. I'm just going to be honest with you. There's no way that the pump can flow more than its displacement. Its displacement here, the O spec output, is 228.49. And you saw it during the test, the flow meter going up and down just a little bit. 228.67, it just caught it when it was just a little bit above the other one. So anywhere between 98 and 100% volumetric efficiency, you're not going to get 100%, but you may get close to it. So we hope that this video has been informative for you to show you when you do those individual modifications. Now, if your kit, now that bag of parts, that whole name, bag of parts, was a mock against me. You can Google right now, bag of parts compared to a modified CP3 pump. And if it's still up there, the competition diesel thread, where one company was coming against me saying, oh, what's your bag of parts going to do against a modified CP3? Well, that company named their product after that bag of parts. That's like the stupidest name anybody could ever put on anything. Bag of parts. Well, it's a bag of something. But anyway, they don't put a cascade valve in their kit. And just for giggles, all right, let's put the stock cascade. We've got everything else on there. Let's put the stock cascade valve back. And you'll see, you'll be amazed the difference it makes. They don't even put one on theirs. So, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That's what our Lord says. We be Abraham's seed. We've never been anyone's slaves. I know that you are the descendants of Abraham. Whoever sins is in bondage to sin. So if the Son of Man makes you free, you shall be free indeed. Jesus from the Gospel of John, speaking to those, and some believed, but not with a saving faith. Okay, stock cascade valve. Right. Close. And pumps on. And start! So if we do our, where's my calculator? Let me find my calculator. Well, you saw it. 216 versus 228. So that's 12. So 12 times roughly 3.5, 42 horsepower difference. So for, all right, 216 times 3.5, 756 horsepower. That's about what we see. We see from 2.8 to 3.5 horsepower per liter per hour in flow. So a stock pump at 200, 700, that's stretching a little bit far. So if we do 200 times 3.2, 640, yeah, you see that all the time. Stock CP3 pump on a lot of trucks, 640 horsepower. So let's do that at 216 times 3.2, 691. Okay. And then we do 228 times 3.2. Boom. It's a big difference. May not seem like much, but when you're talking 200 and we're doing almost 20 more, that's 10%, is it not? Looks like it to me. So take it for what it's. This is the reality. There's no lies here. You saw me do this all live. I haven't manipulated supply pressure and come in and done different things. So there's the reality. If you're buying one of those kits that's got that stupid fitting, the fitting does nothing. The high pressure fitting, you do more damage to a pump. Potentially taking this fitting out, and all they're doing is drilling. It does nothing. It does nothing to add extra flow. We test pumps with a smaller line than the passage inside that fitting, and we do our own 13.2 millimeter pumps. There's no restriction comes from that fitting. That's a bunch of malarkey. We don't even put it in our kit anymore. Ours is 3 parts. It's the supply pump, the improp, and the cascade valve, and you see the difference they all make. So I hope you found this informative, and we're likely going to put up a video that shows you how to modify all these parts. So if you set that cascade pressure too high, you eat your supply pump up and you send metal through your injectors. So you got to be very careful what you do there. We're not recommending or instructing you how to do anything. We'll just show you what we did here. Thank you for watching. We hope you found this informative, and if you like it, give us a thumbs up. If you give us a thumbs down, doesn't matter, doesn't count anyway. You can't even see it. Subscribe to our channel, and if we can grow our channel enough, we'll put a lot of info up there that you guys have been longing for, like injector secrets, stroker CP3 secrets, things of that nature. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day, and look to the Lord. You can't go wrong.